Are you a 3PL spending more time and money than you'd like recruiting and onboarding logistics roles? Then it's time to check out Rapido Solutions Group, the leaders in nearshore logistics staffing. Located right next door in Mexico, they have access to the freight talent you need. From carrier sales to tracking and tracing and everything in between, they can do the heavy lifting for you. So if you're ready to get your time back and want to move fast, check out Rapido Solutions Group. Visit gorapido.com to get started today. Have you heard about Bitfreighter and the EDI revolution? Bitfreighter helps companies automate communication with their freight partners through unlimited messaging and quoting. Traditional providers can't say that. The Bitfreighter team is also available 24/7 and responds immediately by phone, email, or yes, even text. Legacy providers can't say that either. So if you want to scale your operations to save time and money, come join the EDI revolution with us. Visit bitfreighter.com to get started today. Hello, and welcome to the Bootstrapper's Guide to Logistics, the podcast highlighting founders doing it the way that doesn't get a lot of attention. We're here to change that by sharing their stories and inspiring others to take the leap.
It's a roller coaster ride. You might ultimately fail.
That's when I kind of knew I was onto something.
It was very hard.
It truly is building a legacy.
The more life you live, the more wisdom you have.
Because we are where we're supposed to be, kind of answering the call.
Don't shoulder entrepreneurship on your own.
I'm your host, Nate Schutz. Let's build something together from the ground up. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the show. Once again, we have video now, something that's new for the Bootstrapper's Guide to Logistics. It's 2024. We're trying new things. We're learning new tricks all the time, but the heart of the show is still exactly what it's always been. We're sharing stories of founders who are starting and selling companies the way that doesn't get a lot of attention. It's very old-fashioned. Sometimes it sounds archaic to some people that you can start a company with next to no resources and build it and create value and not have to rely on outside funding. And then you control your own destiny. You get all the highs and all the lows of entrepreneurship, often resting on the shoulders of a single person. And so that's what we're all about at the Bootstrapper's Guide to Logistics. And this week, we're going to explore one of those stories with Steve Schlecht, who's the founder of OB Fulfillment. Steve, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Nate. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. You've been on an interesting ride. Can you first tell us a little bit about what you do in e-commerce fulfillment and how did you get into it in the first place?
Yeah. So do you want to talk about OB Fulfillment or the current company, Busk?
What you started in the beginning?
Yeah. So I had started an e-commerce fulfillment company. The primary service offering was fulfillment, but the broader vision was retail consolidation, which is a little bit of a different angle on fulfillment. It's more, case pick, pallet in, pallet out. And we can talk more about that, but retail consolidation, e-commerce fulfillment.
What about the fulfillment side do you find personally interesting? Like what drew you to it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. My background is in logistics and fulfillment at PepsiCo. So, I spent a good amount of foundational years there. I would say just the complexity of it. I think that also the other thing is that, you get to see physically how products are moved around the world, including within your facility. And you're really in the last line of defense before a product goes out to a customer. And that was one thing I really liked about logistics is that you're working with clients and you're really a core piece of their brand, and that being the final step before going to a customer. And I think I like that part of logistics specifically.
There's something about fulfillment and logistics in particular that requires high spatial intelligence, which isn't something that gets talked about as a skill very often. Some people are very emotionally intelligent, or they're really gifted with numbers or economics, you name it. But the ability to visualize in 3 dimensions how products can be oriented and how they move, I don't know if I've found as many people outside of logistics that are even aware that that's a thing, except for like the dads who can pack the car really, really well, like for a family road trip.
Mm-hmm.
And because I think we all have innate gifts that we're born with, and it often takes us decades to uncover what they are. And what you're describing sounds a little bit like that. There's a spatial intelligence piece or solving puzzles.
Yep,
Were you a
absolutely.
good student?
Yeah, I would say it's a good student, but funny you say that. I can remember myself building Legos all weekend long when I was a kid. So if you want to make that uh, make that comparison, I think there's a comparison there of how I got into logistics.
For sure. Actually, I designed the layout for a brand new warehouse a handful of years ago,
Okay,
and I used some CAD technology. I used, of course, 100 Excel spreadsheets, and then I actually brought a giant set of Legos into like a Fortune 500 company, and I built the warehouse using Legos, and they all looked at me like I was crazy. And I'm like, no, until you can actually see it and visualize it, you're not going to see how other people aren't going to be able to understand in 3 dimensions what it looks like. And so when I had to expense the Lego sticks, it was like $500 because a lot of Legos, and they're like,
sure.
"Why are you buying Legos?" Well,
Yeah,
it's for a warehouse. It's for a good cause. Trust me.
sure. Right.
So, what was the catalyst for you that you knew that you wanted to leave a career where it sounds like you were having a lot of success and do something on your own?
That's a great question. I like to think that I've always wanted to start my own business, even from when I was an early, teenager. I had side hustles out in the country where I grew up, scooping horse manure and whatever, picking mushrooms and selling to the local steakhouse. I had a bunch of side gigs. And the other thing I think that was important was that I grew up around entrepreneurship, which is a very unique opportunity that I don't think many people get to have. So it was always there and it was always accessible around me. And just to know that you can do it and really anybody can do it. So, I feel like my path was already determined from early get go. It's just, it took me 10 years to go through corporate to figure out what my start was. So, I had a lot of good experiences before that. And, I was at PepsiCo for just about 6 years, had a stint at a startup, and then another couple of stints in consulting as well. And I've been looking around for that opportunity where I could use my unique skill set and background to deliver a good service offering out there in the marketplace. And I just thought it was time. 31. I was 30 when I started my business, and based off of my experience, I thought that I could make a go of it, and yeah, I did.
It felt like you were ready. So, what was the first iteration of it? You did you go out and get a warehouse and start looking for e-commerce brands? How did you get your first client?
Yeah, so funny enough, I actually had started this e-commerce fulfillment company back in 2019, and I didn't have all the pieces there, right? And I had a couple more jobs in corporate that kind of helped me. I was okay, I can actually do this. I just wasn't ready at that time. How I got my first customer? So I was still working a full-time job in consulting and was driving around the United States and Canada, and I think my first customer was off of Reddit. Matter of fact, um,
Really?
it was off. Yeah, that's right. And I didn't even have a warehouse. I had no warehouse. It was just me and my apartment.
And what did you do? Like, what happened?
So yeah, I found this. So I'd use a service that would ping me anytime somebody would say a keyword on Reddit or Twitter, and then you would jump in. And there's a few other E3 pals that do this, but we jump in. That's funny because we all see each other commenting on the same post because if you find the certain keywords, you can figure it out. Anyways, so yeah, I found this woman. She's got this hot sauce company, and she, I explained to what the opportunity, what I was offering and my experiences was, and sure enough, she signed up and off to the races. Yeah.
So, did you actually go out and source space yourself, or did you work through a third party? How did you execute it?
Yeah, so good question. So that client didn't start for a while, and I actually had onboarded a few other clients between that. One of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to limit my risk, right? I didn't want to go out and get a huge warehouse, and I just wanted to get the minimum viable product, right?
Mhm.
So I found essentially I don't want to call it a WeWork for industrial space, but that's kind of what it was. It was Class C warehouse space in an old industrial building and kind of I would say one of the other a neighborhood outside of Chicago. So I just found a facility that looked like a huge warehouse. In reality, I had 250 square feet of warehouse space, but it didn't matter. I mean, I still had enough space for to do the service that I had sold for on. And so that's how I got my start. I had a small little space, and there were two dock doors. Granted, those two dock doors were accessible to the 20, 30 other clients, the other tenants in the building. But that's how I got my start.
It's so humble. People don't maybe understand how small 250,000 or 250 square feet is. A 53-foot trailer has just over 400 square feet. So you
Yeah.
are operating inside of a footprint of a 53-foot trailer doing e-com fulfillment, and that's about as humble and bootstrapped of a beginning as I can imagine. And Class C's warehousing is not exactly sexy. They're not.
There's nothing sexy about it.
No, it's dim lighting most of the time. There's no temp control in the winter or the summer. It's a
Yeah, and
grind.
it wasn't in the best neighborhood either. And I have a story around that. It was
Yeah, let me hear it.
Oh, well, I mean, I was even I had taken a sales call from my office, my my warehouse, right? And let's just say it was 11 o'clock in the morning in March, and there was a shootout outside. And I'm taking the sales call, and this client, and then I'm taking the sales call, and pop, 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 and the client's like, oh, what's that? And I'm like, oh, wait, how do you explain that one? Hey, your product's going to a warehouse that there was a shootout right outside. I actually moved on from that facility shortly after, but
I'm
yeah,
glad you did.
it's a great story. But it's just part of being scrappy and getting your start, though, right?
When did you start to then feel like you found your rhythm and you had something that was not only viable as a small business, but something that could scale into something larger?
I like to think I'm a pretty optimistic person, and I from the get go, and the amount of leads I was getting, I didn't, I think people can say, oh, 250 square feet, oh, that's it takes a while to figure out you're going to have traction. But I didn't look at the four walls as a validation point. I looked at the validation point being the amount of leads and my
Mhm.
experience that I could sell. So I was, when I'd sold a few clients, and I didn't even have the space to put their product in. So what I would do is that once I finally got a client that was big enough, I went out to another 3PL, knowing this is what I was going to do to partner, so I could share space with them. Say, hey, I've got this huge client coming in. Can I share space with you? And matter of fact, I can help you with my expertise on consulting, whatever, to help stand up your 3PL. And that's what I did. I actually found another 3PL that was uh, starting up as well, and we shared space. And so that I moved all my clients into their warehouse, and so I just kept scaling or selling clients, uh, and I had more space with that 3PL. I was able to grow with them. That was kind of the idea from the get go.
What's interesting about that approach is it's more rooted in cooperation than
Mm-hmm.
competition. That some people look at anybody who's in the same space and say, I'm not going to share any information with them. I'm not going to do anything to help them because, we're arch enemies. We're in the same business and we're going after the same clients. And I'm always somewhat surprised by that approach because the pie is so massive that the
Right.
likelihood of you directly competing for the same piece of business frequently, even in the same city, is often so very small. And so that mindset of it's just a scarcity mindset that I have to take as much as I can always surprises me in the early stages of a company, especially when you're $1 billion company. Yes, you've got to defend your turf no matter what. But in those early stages, you need every ounce of support that you can get. When you look back on that period of partnering with another 3PL, what do you think you learned from each other?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So the other 3PL, I'm still good friends with them. There are folks that have already exited huge companies, $500 million companies, big company. I think three of the guys there had exited about $500 million companies. So this wasn't their first go around. I had worked with one gentleman, John Lage, I'll give him a shout out, and we had a kindred spirit in many ways. But they think about business in a very different light than I do, and I think just partnering with another company can, and to your point, as long as you don't treat it as a zero sum game, there's
Hmm.
a lot of learnings that can be shared. Saying, hey, I'm learning that this tactic on selling clients is working for me. And then as long as you don't look at business as zero sum game, you can share that information, and both you and the other company can grow at the same time. So yeah, your point, it can be a win-win if done right.
So as you look back on the first, couple of years of your journey, are there any things that stand out that you think, oh, I wish I would have done that differently?
I would have, good question, Nate. I would have probably have partnered with the 3PL from the get-go versus what I had done, which is, gone out and find a small space. I don't, I find that clients it doesn't matter too much to them if you're sharing space with another 3PL, as long as you're the face of it and ultimately responsible, it's okay. So I think from the get-go, I would have found a company like that I had partnered with much earlier on, and I would have scaled much faster. Because warehousing in the game, at the end of the day, it's a very capital intensive business, and you also want to reduce your risk, your risk profile. So I think that's what I would have done differently from the get go.
And now you're at a place where you have built a successful business, and now you have sold it, and now you're into a new chapter. Can you take us through what was the decision to sell like? How did you get to that place of saying, I know the next right thing is that?
Yeah. So good question. So I'll give you a little background to start. So my business was e-commerce fulfillment and also retail consolidation. And if you understand the nature of retail consolidation, you have larger, I would say, independent brands that are shipping to retailers across the country, right? And typically, based with retail consolidation, you'll need your clients will take up a good amount of space, anywhere from 300, 500,000 square feet is probably what you'll need to start a retail consolidator facility. And I just didn't have well, first off, venture capital is really tough to get right now, and I didn't really want to go that route. And number two, it's very capital intensive, opening up a warehouse, and also just the fact that you have to make sure that you have clients that will cover the lease, right, and not walk out. And you can structure a contract to cover that. But I realized that I needed a level of scale to compete with the big boys. And I knew, and I thought that retail consolidation was really what I could offer to the broader market. So it's another reason why I was really honing in on, okay, I want to build up retail consolidation as a service offering, as my primary service offering, but I'm going to need to find a partner to help me scale that. And it's going to take a lot of people, and the industry is consolidating at the current moment as well. There's only around 3 to 4 major players. So, I had found another company I worked with in the past and pitched them my vision of what this could become. And, our visions aligned of what retail consolidation could be. And that's kind of how it started. And this conversation. So it was a win-win where I could still essentially run the business vertical with essentially 750 people as resources to help stand this program up.
What has the transition been for you then personally, where one day you get to call all the shots and you have all the risk and all the reward, and then now you're in a marriage and there is another person and another group of people that you have to take into account, and company culture again, that can be good or bad.
So, yes, I have a very unique situation. Well, first off, it's been phenomenal. I've known Busky for 7, 8 years, the Busky logistics team and the executive leadership team. And, it's been great. And I've had if any advice to entrepreneurs out there thinking about exploring what I've done, I highly recommend it, just as long as there's a relationship there, or everybody's aligned with what your role is in the new venture or the new company, right? And with Busky, I know all the executive leadership teams, so it's not like I was coming in as a new guy and no one really knew me. I've known these folks for a long time, so it's been great. I still maintain my autonomy to a certain extent. Now, granted, I speak the same, I guess, consulting language with a few of the executive leadership teams. So as long as I'm delivering this is what we want to do, what I want to do, and why we should do it, typically it gets rubber stamped and moved on to the next step, right? But just as long as it makes sense. So it takes a little bit more managing up, but that's okay. And that's that's just a part of, that's just one part of what I knew going into it, that was going to be a part of the process, or part of the new arrangement.
So if we zoom out and just look at entrepreneurship as a whole, there are a handful of storylines that are common, and you see them in movies all the time. It's the guys who drop out of college and write software in their garage and then build Apple, and that's a common storyline. The other ones seem like they're oftentimes very straight lines of, I knew that this was what I was going to do forever. I was great at sales, for example, and I just went out, found an opportunity, and then I built the operations to support that, and everything is great. And there are a whole bunch of other variations. What I like about your story, Steve, is it's creative and that it's unexpected. You didn't, start entrepreneurship, full bore until you were in your 30s. You learned a bunch of things, shoveling horse manure and, picking wild mushrooms, and you learn the basics of buying and selling.
Yeah.
And then you also learn the professional side of things, working for big companies. And then you're able to combine those skill sets into a very humble start. And then that evolved into something where now you're part of a large organization and you're getting to do it in an entirely new way and a new configuration of entrepreneurship almost. And the intrapreneurship movement is still very early. And so you've gone through each of these stages, and I find that remarkable that you can adapt to those environments so effortlessly. Where does that come from?
Yeah, well, I think also, Nate, that most people don't know this, but I've had a handful of businesses that I've had even in my 20s where I was working a full-time job and I was tinkering with, okay, will this be the one? And and it's working in it's working in silence, and it's not as sexy. But to your point, I was not the type to just drop out of college or not have, I had to put food on the table for myself, right? So in those experiences compounded into what I started with OB Logistics, right? So, I think it's just getting more reps at bat, to answer your question.
Just being in the game longer.
As my friend would say, being in the arena. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you increase your surface area to get lucky or to catch some tailwinds, it sounds like.
Right. Yep.
Any advice that you would offer to somebody who is maybe where you were, let's say 5 years ago? You're working in a large company. Maybe you've got a couple of ideas in the back of your mind on what something could be. What would you say to that person?
I would say just get out there and start selling. Forget the business. I mean, business plans are helpful and they're good, but get out there and start selling, right? Take small little risk, throw a couple ads out there on Google or Facebook. It's not all going to hit, but you're going to learn every single little experiment you have until, if you really want to start that business, I can guarantee to anybody that puts in the reps, they'll eventually be able to get out of their corporate job and start that business if that's what they so choose.
I dig it. Steve, thank you for sharing your story. I know that your next chapter you have the resources now to unlock the vision that you've had for several years. And that's really exciting to get to see somebody in their element and able to bring into existence something that they're passionate about. So if you look 5 years down the road, do you have in the back of your mind, like, I will know we've accomplished what we set out to accomplish when this is true? What does that look like?
So, good question. My goal is, we should be a $500 million company just in this vertical hopefully within 5 to 10 years. We've got the scale and the resources to do that. And hey, I set out a goal for our broader team that we should be able to do this, and we have the talent in place. And I would like to be the number one retail consolidator in logistics in the United States.
Well, I'm not going to bet against you.
Thanks, Nate.
Where can people reach out to you if they want to chat or learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, Twitter, LinkedIn is great. Feel free to email me as well. I can drop my email address to you, or if you want to contact me.
Yeah, go ahead and just share it here.
Yeah, it's at steve.schlecht@busky.com. And feel free to contact me.
Right on. Well, Steve, thank you for sharing your story. Again, I can't wait to see what happens next for you, and we're all rooting for you.
Appreciate it, Nate. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Bootstrapper's Guide to Logistics, and a special thank you to our sponsors and the team behind the scenes who make it all possible. Be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the podcast to get the latest updates. To learn more about the show and connect with the growing community of entrepreneurs, visit logisticsfounders.com. And of course, thank you to all the founders who trust us to share their stories.